No orc stat block in the new D&D Monster Manual. I'm sure some of you have already seen videos or articles about this, how the orc, an iconic monster of D&D past, present, and presumably future, is not included in this book. And don't worry, I'm going to have more to say about that book soon. Its many changes, both good and But yeah, it's 2025 and Orcs Cancelled has quickly become fodder for outrage, and you guys seem to like it when I try to diffuse such D&D scandals, though spoiler alert, I'm actually not too keen about this change myself. So specifically, there is no distinct orc, capital O, stat block of gameplay mechanics to use as a unique orc monster. And I'm being specific because there are some nuances to that, which we'll discuss later. Relax at the keyboard. But yeah, for a 50-year-old game that millions of people experienced for its first few decades through a playstyle often crudely described as kick down door, stab orc in face, removing the orc is a pretty startling change. That's almost like no dragons or no dungeons. Or okay, imagine if there were only like 2 pages of guidelines for running dungeons in the new Dungeon Master's Guide. Oh, that would be crazy. So on one hand, I think veteran D&D lovers and anyone who appreciates D&D history or just that hack and slash, shoot and loot playstyle has a right to at least be surprised by the apparent disappearance of a creature so foundational to D&D style fantasy. On the other hand, this change shouldn't be surprising at all to anyone who has tuned into D&D's changes at any point in the last 10 years. Yeah, as far back as 2014, the Monster Manual has not included distinct monster stat blocks for any of the core playable races from the player's handbook. As in, since at least 2014, there's no stat block for human, elf, half-orc, gnome, tiefling, dragonborn, etc. And it was public knowledge for a year, maybe 2 years before the new 2024 Player's Handbook came out, that orcs were going to be one of the new core player options. Therefore, of course, there would not be an orc stat block in the new Monster Manual. We should have known, yet for some reason, so many people, myself included, still expected to see orcs in the new Monster Manual, knowing that it would break this design convention of the last decade. If anything, that cognitive dissonance speaks to how ingrained orcs are as a D&D monster in the minds of so many people. But was it really dissonance? Let's not forget, some other D&D rulebooks, like Volo's Guide to Monsters from 2016, included a section of monstrous races, encouraging you to play as kobolds, kenku, tritons, and even orcs. So those monsters and more were both playable options, not core, but playable, and they had monster stat blocks. Heck, one of my own most beloved PCs, Hantu the Barbarian, who I've played in 3 different campaigns, the only character for whom I've commissioned a custom mini and painted myself. He's an orc. And hey, fun little tangent, Hantu, my orc barbarian, is even going to be illustrated by the awesome artists at Chepeku. Yes, the same Chepeku who is sponsoring this video, so I can remind you about their $5 archive of over 4,000 fantasy RPG maps to use in your games. Joining the Chepeku Patreon gets you a new map pack each week and the ability to vote on new maps you'd like them to create, as if they don't have everything you need already. Each pack has a ton of variations, and depending on your tier, you get access to printable PDFs, as well as animated versions of each map. And by default, Chepeku maps work on every major VTT, so check them out through the link below. But back to Hantu. I have had a ton of fun playing as this badass orc in multiple campaigns, and I made this character straight from Volo's Guide. But if I'm not mistaken, it was that same book which drew attention to what we might call the legacy description of orcs in D&D. Because it was around this time in D&D's surging popularity that the game had more eyes on it than ever before, and some of those eyes belonged to people well versed in anthropological and other cultural studies. And not that orcs had never been critically examined before, even Tolkien himself, who plucked this obscure underworld corpse, yeah, like that's the etymology, straight from Beowulf, and made them into the mainstream creature they are today, he grappled with similar topics decades ago. But now, some of these experts were looking at D&D and saying, hey, it seems like some of the same language used to describe orcs in this game to justify why they should be indiscriminately stabbed in the face, that same language has also been used to dehumanize and make monsters out of real people and perpetuate their very real suffering. Whoa. As someone without a relevant academic background in this area, and as someone who thankfully has never been told I have an inherent bloodlust or limited capacity for reason or love, well, I'm sure I'll get the reason critique in the comments on this very video. Yeah, I can see how using that same language for the same reason, regardless of intention, ends up creating a connection here. Never, saying that orcs are a stand-in for any real-world people. Simply saying that this linguistic connection turns stabbing orcs into something other than purely wholesome gaming fun. But also, whoa, that's quite the info bomb to just drop on Twitter or wherever, and it leaves me with a lot of questions. Thankfully, the situation proceeded gracefully, with everyone listening to the thoughtful experts, sharing their professional opinions on the matter. Then those experts worked with D&D to help the designers make adjustments in such a way that honored the game's history, honored that legacy experience of millions of D&D fans, and honored the people affected by those stereotypes. JK, obviously JK, this became grist for the Outrage Mill. Outrage Mill, Outrage Mill, confidently incorrect, Outrage Mill. I'm mad all the time and I don't know why, gonna blame somebody I don't like online. Yeah, just like a lot of overly aggressive takes from people basically saying, I don't care if it was 1980 whatever, it was wrong then, it's wrong today, and if you play that way, you're a bad person. And a lot of overly defensive takes to the point of also being digressive. No, orcs are pure evil, they're supposed to get stabbed, and actually, you're the bad person for even thinking that I wouldn't think it wasn't wrong to not stab them. It was messy, and in these messy situations, compromise isn't always the way to go, but in this particular case, and in my non-expert but open-minded opinion, it seems like D&D's solution of just cutting out this iconic monster was not just about falling in line with the treatment of the other core playable species, it was tossing out the metaphorical orc baby with the bathwater in hopes of avoiding further outrage. But if you've scrolled past some of the same videos and articles that I've seen about this solution, the Outrage Mill is grinding away over this decision. And now, what? Like, even though the new Monster Manual has room for over 500 creatures, it was made inconvenient for everyone to include unique orcs in their D&D game. Because yeah, totally, you can still do whatever you want, it's D&D. And yeah, there's a suggested substitute stat block, the tough, but it's generically any humanoid, elf, dwarf, human, whatever. So maybe I missed it, but I didn't see any suggestions for how to take the tough or any of these awesome, humanoid stat blocks. There's a ton of them we're supposed to be using now, and how to make them unique to the species. Like, shouldn't there be a table, a list of which species traits from the player's handbook to drop in to these blank humanoid stat blocks? That would be cool and interesting and really multiply the number of monsters we have instantly. Again, maybe that's in there and I haven't seen it yet, so now my keyboard warriors, fly and let me know. I know I'm no expert here, so I'm open to hearing why I'm wrong, why D&D made the exact right call, or maybe why I'm not being hard enough on D&D for this situation. But most of all, this feels like a missed opportunity, or really a purposefully avoided opportunity to engage the curious and open-minded game master with expert insight on how to better handle this adult topic in our games so we can learn and find ways to show respect for D&D's traditions, for everyone at the table, and for this absolutely iconic yet conflicted fantasy creature. So if you are curious to learn more, I highly recommend checking out the channel Legal Kimchi, linked somewhere on the screen, who's made some insightful videos in this subject area, or just enjoy this other cool RPG video and consider joining my wonderful supporters on Patreon who sometimes get my less filtered thoughts on RPG news. Thank you, and keep building.